Between the Mediterranean coast and the marshes of the Camargue lies a place that was once among the most important pilgrimage sites of medieval Europe, Saint-Gilles-du-Gard. Today, a tranquil town with barely more than 13,000 inhabitants. Yet its history reaches far back and is closely interwoven with the fate of the Christian Occident. We find ourselves in the heart of Provence, just a few kilometers from the Rhone Delta. This region in southern France has been a melting pot of various cultures since antiquity. Greeks, Romans, Visigoths, and Saracens have all left their mark. The town owes its prosperity to its strategically advantageous location. The Canal of Saint-Gilles once connected the place directly with the Mediterranean Sea. In the Middle Ages, this port was an important hub for goods and pilgrims setting out for Santiago de Compostela, Rome, or the Holy Land. During its heyday in the 12th century, Saint-Gilles even rivaled Marseille and Arles for supremacy in Mediterranean trade. Today, Saint-Gilles presents itself as a typical Provençal town with sun-drenched squares, cafes under plane trees, and the authentic flair of southern France. The weekly market reminds us of the long trading tradition, but the true heart of the city, the reason why Saint-Gilles achieved European significance in the Middle Ages, we find here. The imposing Abbey Church that rises before us, a masterpiece of Romanesque architecture and UNESCO World Heritage Site. The history of Saint-Gilles begins with a hermit. According to legend, in the 7th century, a Greek monk named Aegidius, Gilles in French, settled in the forests near the Rhone. His piety and the miracles attributed to him soon attracted attention. The most famous tale recounts how the Visigothic king Wamba, while hunting, pursued a doe that sought refuge with Gilles. An arrow intended for the animal wounded the hermit instead. Impressed by his holiness, the king gifted him land for the founding of a monastery. The first church on this site was probably built in the 9th century. When the relics of Gilles, by then venerated as a saint, were transferred here, the place rapidly developed into a pilgrimage destination. In 1116, a monumental building project began. Abbot Pierre Gilles commissioned a new, massive abbey church that would accommodate the growing masses of pilgrims. It was built during the height of Romanesque architecture in southern France, and was conceived as a 3-aisled basilica with a transept and an elaborate ambulatory. The strategic importance of Saint-Gilles as a pilgrimage station can hardly be overestimated. It was located at the confluence of several important pilgrimage routes, as the 4th station of the Via Tolosana to Santiago de Compostela, as a starting point for pilgrimages to Rome, and as an embarkation port for journeys to the Holy Land. The pilgrimage guide, Codex Calixtinus, from the 12th century, explicitly names Saint-Gilles as one of the most important pilgrimage sites of Christendom. Yet the history of the abbey is not only marked by religious splendor. In the 13th century, the region was shaken by the Albigensian Crusade, a bloody campaign against the Cathars, condemned as heretics. Saint-Gilles stood at the center of these conflicts, as we will see later at the tomb of the papal legate Pierre de Castelnau. The centuries took their toll on the once magnificent abbey. Religious wars, the French Revolution, and natural destruction left only parts of the original structure. What we see today is fragmentary, yet still an impressive testament to medieval architecture. We now stand before what many art historians consider one of the highlights of Romanesque sculpture in Europe, the monumental west facade of the Abbey Church of Saint-Gilles. Created between 1120 and 1160, it presents itself as a stone picture book, a theological program of extraordinary complexity and artistic quality. The facade extends over 23 meters in width and displays a well-conceived ensemble of 3 portals, friezes, and columns. The 3 portals form the centerpiece of this composition. The central main portal is dedicated to Christ and the Majestus Domini. To the right, we see the portal of the Crucifixion, and to the left, that of the Adoration of the Magi. Together, they tell the story of salvation from Christ's incarnation to his sacrificial death and his heavenly reign. Let us examine the details. The quality of the stonework is exceptional. The figures show remarkable anatomical accuracy and emotional expressiveness, characteristics that distinguish southern French Romanesque sculpture from other regions. Particularly noteworthy are the plastically protruding apostle figures on the columns between the portals. The symbolic imagery of the facade follows a precise theological logic. Here we see animal symbolism typical of the Romanesque period. Lions as emblems of Christ, depictions of apocalyptic creatures, and numerous other motifs that conveyed a complex religious message to medieval viewers. The Latin inscriptions also play an important role. They not only serve to identify the depicted scenes, but add another dimension of meaning to the visual language. For the few literate people of the Middle Ages, they offered an additional layer of interpretation. The stylistic classification of the Façade of St. Gilles reveals its significance for the development of European sculpture. Here we see elements that were later developed in the Cathedral of Chartres and other Gothic churches. St. Gilles stands at a key position between pure Romanesque and the early signs of the Gothic style. The art historian Émile Malle aptly described this facade as the most beautiful page of the Provençal Bible, a stone testament to medieval faith and artistic skill. As we now enter the interior of the church, we are confronted with a surprising fact to the original Romanesque design. What we see is only a fragment of the once planned monumental basilica. The original church was conceived to be significantly larger. Here, we see a reconstruction of how the Abbey Church should have looked in the 12th century. However, construction problems, financial constraints, and historical upheavals meant that the ambitious project was never fully realized. Nevertheless, the interior offers remarkable examples of Romanesque architecture. The massive pillars, the squat proportions, and the absence of large windows are typical features of this style. In contrast to the later Gothic with its soaring lines and light-flooded spaces, Romanesque appears more earthbound, mystical, focused on inner contemplation rather than external splendor. The capitals of the columns with their figurative and floral ornaments deserve special attention. Each one is a work of art in itself and tells biblical stories or symbolic content. An architectural rarity is hidden in the so-called V d'Arles, a spiral staircase of extraordinary construction. This staircase, concealed in one of the towers, is considered a masterpiece of medieval stone masonry and demonstrates the technical abilities of the builders of that time. Also remarkable is the play of light in the church space. Depending on the time of day, sunbeams penetrate through the few, strategically placed windows and create a special atmosphere of spiritual concentration. The Romanesque master builders skillfully used light as an architectural element. Today, the church continues to be used for worship, a continuity of spiritual life that stretches back over 900 years. While the liturgical furnishings are predominantly modern, they blend respectfully into the historic space. We now descend into the spiritual heart of the church, the crypt. This underground space belongs to the oldest parts of the building and was the actual reason for the construction of the entire Abbey Church. Here was the tomb of Saint Aegidius, the destination of countless medieval pilgrims. The crypt extends beneath the entire choir of the upper church. Its architectural design is of sublime simplicity, low vaults, massive columns, and a tangible atmosphere of contemplation and spirituality. The Romanesque stylistic elements appear here in their purest form. The squat columns support heavy groin vaults and convey a sense of stability and earthiness. The darkness, broken only by a few lights, creates a meditative atmosphere. In some places, traces of the original painting can still be seen. In the Middle Ages, these walls were covered with colorful frescoes depicting scenes from the life of Saint Aegidius and other saints, a visual catechism for the often illiterate pilgrims. Even today, the crypt remains a place of living devotion. The numerous votive offerings and candles testify to the unbroken veneration of Saint Aegidius, a spiritual continuity spanning more than 1,000 years. The special acoustics of the crypt, the echo of footsteps, the muffled whispers of visitors, enhance the spiritual dimension of this space. In the Middle Ages, chants and prayers were intoned here, their sound reverberating through the centuries. We now stand before the actual spiritual center of the Abbey Church, the tomb of Saint Aegidius. In the Middle Ages, this saint's tomb was a magnet for countless pilgrims from all over Europe. Aegidius, or Saint Gilles as he is called in France, was one of the most popular saints of the Middle Ages. As one of the 14 holy helpers, he was invoked for various afflictions, for the healing of cancer, for infertility, for the protection of nursing mothers, and as patron of beggars and cripples. The pilgrims who visited his tomb took special badges, small souvenirs that testify to their pilgrimage. These pilgrim badges from St. Gilles have been found throughout Europe, from Scandinavia to Italy, proof of the supra-regional importance of this pilgrimage site. The original tomb was much more magnificent than what we see today. It was an elaborately designed shrine, presumably adorned with gold and precious stones, housing the relics of the saint. During the religious wars and the French Revolution, this shrine was destroyed or plundered. Today's tomb is simple in design, yet the spiritual significance of the place remains unbroken. Believers still come here to pray and ask for the saint's intercession, an uninterrupted tradition for more than 1,000 years. The numerous votive offerings and candles testify to the living veneration of Saint Aegidius. Each of these objects tells a personal story of hope, faith, and gratitude, a fascinating testament to lived piety through the centuries. Here, in a side chapel of the crypt, we encounter a seemingly unassuming tomb that nevertheless marks one of the most dramatic episodes in the history of southern France, the final resting place of the papal legate Pierre de Castelnau. Castelnau was murdered in 1208, an event that triggered the Albigensian Crusade and forever changed the history of Provence. As an envoy of Pope Innocent III, he was tasked with taking action against the Cathars, a religious movement considered heretical by the Church. The Cathars, from the Greek word for the pure ones, had gained a large following in southern France. Their dualistic teaching, which postulated a fundamental opposition between good and evil, spirit and matter, contradicted Catholic theology. The movement found particular appeal among the educated upper class and common people. When Castelnau excommunicated Count Raymond VI of Toulouse for refusing to take action against the Cathars, the situation escalated. On January 14, 1208, the legate was murdered by a knight on the banks of the Rhone. The news of Castelnau's murder reached Pope Innocent III, who then called for a crusade against the Albigensians. The consequences were devastating. One of Europe's most flourishing regions was plunged into a 20-year war waged with relentless brutality. The notorious words of the papal legate Arnaud Amalric during the siege of Béziers reflect the cruelty of this conflict. Kill them all, God will know his own. The Occitan culture of southern France suffered a blow from which it never fully recovered. The unassuming tomb here in St. Gilles thus marks a turning point in history, the spark that ignited a catastrophe whose consequences still reverberate in the cultural memory of the region today. The Abbey Church of Saint-Gilles is more than an architectural masterpiece or an art historical monument. It is a living testimony to European history and spirituality, a place where the great currents of the Middle Ages converged and are still palpable today. In the walls of this church, we encounter medieval faith in all its complexity, its heights and depths, its artistic expression, and its political entanglements. UNESCO has recognized the significance of this extraordinary monument by declaring it a World Heritage Site as part of the Way of St. James. Yet, beyond official recognition, St. Gilles is above all a place that invites us to connect with the past and reflect on our own spiritual and cultural roots. The stones of St. Gilles tell stories of faith and doubt, of art and violence, of pilgrims and the powerful. Stories that can still touch us today if we are willing to listen to them.